and unforeseen events would become a part of the social economic horizon in the world. And the reason is that the globalization, through the liberalization of trade, investment, capital flows, and now the labor flows have brought us all in an interdependent planet. And this interdependence has both the positive as well as the negative aspects. If you look at the recent global financial crisis, you would learn a few lessons from that. One, it was not anticipated. Not even the best minds in the world were able to forecast and predict the intensity, the spread, and the magnitude of the crisis which has hit us during the last 2 years. The second, some of us who believe the decoupling between the emerging economies and the advanced economies were proved wrong, because although the fundamentals in the emerging markets were quite strong, but they also suffered as a spillover effect from what happened in the United States and to some extent in Europe. So the decoupling is no longer something which we should aspire for, because it is inevitable that when you have such liberal flows of resources, then this particular aspect of interdependence would not allow the decoupling to take place. But what is more important today is to realize that the dynamics of the economic global equation is shifting. And the three big countries of Asia, China, India, and Indonesia, have actually been in the vanguard of the resumption of economic growth, while the advanced countries are just getting out of the real economic downturn. These countries, the three large countries, having a population of almost 3 billion people, which is a very sizable population, are providing the impetus for the resumption of the global economic growth. 8% in China, India 8%, and some people are talking about 10% in a few years, Indonesia 6 to 7%, while the OECD countries as a whole are just stagnating, and the US has just started coming out of the recession. So going for the future, you must realize that there is going to be a shift in the economic power balance, and we in Pakistan must recognize this reality and position ourselves in this perspective. The other lesson I would draw from this global financial crisis is that countries like India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, China have come out very much unscathed from this crisis. And the reason was that unlike the advanced countries where market fundamentalism had taken hold, we followed a policy of cautious liberalization and very strong regulatory oversight. We did not indulge in the kind of exotic products like the CDS and the collateralized debt obligations and all kinds of complex derivatives which really brought grief to the advanced countries, because the regulators here in these countries were very tough. And perhaps the Western countries should learn from the regulatory oversight and the prudential norms which the Asian countries have been able to establish during the last 10 years. The third characteristic of the global economy, and particularly for the CFOs, is the huge information explosion which is taking place. And the speed of this explosion is exponential. And that you can realize what kind of challenges it faces for you to sift out the right information and advise the management of your companies to take the right decisions. If you do not mine the data and you do not sift out the chaff from the grain, then you are going to bring a lot of grief to your own companies. And the sanctity of the profession of the CFO is going to be impaired. So it is a heavy responsibility about that what you were doing in the past is not the way you're going to do your job in the future. And let me elaborate on these points. There are 5 ways in which the role of the CFO has to change in the future in order to meet these 3 challenges. The first of all is that you have to get out of the short-term quarterly reports, annual financial statements, and look at the long term. If you're cutting costs on investment, on human resources, on technology in order to show a healthy balance sheet for the first quarter or the second quarter or the third quarter, you're actually compromising on the capacity of your company in the long term. And I have found this persistent tendency among the CFOs who are too much preoccupied with the short-term profits and the short-term considerations for the balance sheet. You have to look at the productive capacity expansion of your company as far as the time horizon is concerned. Therefore, please do not, and I repeat, do not just consider or tap yourself on the back by saying that, look, I have created so much surplus for my company, while what you're doing is that you are completely eroding the foundation upon which the superstructure of your company is based. The second point is that we have to get away from the shareholder maximization model to a more broad-based stakeholder maximization value model, which means that it is not only that you work in your company as a CFO to help the shareholders, but you have to work for the society, you have to work for the employees, you have to work for the people who are benefiting from your products or your services, which is your customers. And that, to me, is a mindset which does not exist, not only in Pakistan, but in many other parts of the world. So this shift from the narrow focus on maximization of the shareholder value to a larger stakeholder value maximization is something which CFOs have to consider very seriously and have to imbibe in their own mindset and the practices. The third is that we have to deviate and make a departure from the single bottom line to a triple bottom line. The environmental and the social issues which are becoming so overwhelming for the future sustenance of our planet that if we ignore them and we are only looking at extracting the natural resources or converting the natural resources into products, depleting and harming the ecology and the environment for the future, then this is again a very myopic view of the world. So what you have to do as CFOs, and you should be trained for that because it's no fault of yours,